Do you remember counting Eddie Stobart trucks on family car journeys? You probably spotted hundreds of those green and red lorries thundering down British motorways. They once had 25,000 fan club members, 2,700 trucks, 3,500 trailers, £556 million in annual revenue, over 6,500 jobs across Britain. You'd think those stats belong to a thriving British success story, right? Wrong. They belong to Eddie Stobart in 2024, the year they posted an £883,000 loss and officially lost their independence forever. Here's what makes this even more insane. At their peak in 2018, Eddie Stobart was pulling in £843 million in revenue. They were growing by 35% year on year. Their trucks were everywhere. Their brand was stronger than ever. Yet within 5 years, this logistics giant needed not one, but 2 rescue deals to survive. How do you go from £843 million in revenue to begging for bailouts? If you want to hear more stories like this about British brands that captured our hearts, hit that like button and subscribe, because this answer exposes the brutal reality behind Britain's most loved truck company. I'm going to take you through the real story of Eddie Stobart, not the sanitised version you see in corporate press releases, not the nostalgic documentaries that skip the uncomfortable bits. The truth about how Britain's most beloved haulage company was systematically destroyed by the very forces that were supposed to save it. Eddie Stobart's story isn't just about trucks. It's about what happens when financial engineers get their hands on something we love. By the end of this video, you'll understand why even the most beloved British brands can't survive in today's ruthless marketplace. The birth of Britain's truck spotting obsession. Let's go back to where it all began. Cumberland, 1976. Eddie Stobart Sr. is running a small agricultural business with his son, Edward. They've got a handful of trucks. Nothing special. Just another family haulage firm scratching out a living in the north of England. But here's where the genius begins. Young Edward Stobart doesn't just want clean trucks. He wants immaculate trucks. Spotless. Polished to perfection. Every single one painted in that distinctive green and red livery. And then comes the masterstroke. He starts naming every truck after women. Suddenly, these weren't just lorries shifting goods. They were personalities. They were characters in a story that played out on Britain's motorways every single day. Kids started spotting them. Families started counting them on holiday journeys. What Eddie Stobart Jr. had accidentally created was Britain's first lifestyle brand that happened to move freight. Think about that for a moment. How do you make commercial vehicles emotionally compelling? You give them names. You make them pristine. You turn truck spotting into a family activity. By the 1990s, something extraordinary had happened. The Eddie Stobart fan club had over 25,000 members. That's more than many football clubs had season ticket holders. They were selling merchandise, publishing magazines, making TV documentaries. People were buying model Eddie Stobart trucks for their kids. Eddie Stobart's success wasn't really about superior logistics. Oh no, it was about understanding something that big corporations still don't get today. Emotional connection sells better than efficiency charts. While other haulage companies were competing on price and delivery times, Eddie Stobart was building something much more valuable. They were building love, and that love translated into customer loyalty that money couldn't buy. But as we're about to discover, building a beloved brand and building a sustainable business are two very different challenges. Going corporate when private equity came calling. Fast forward to 2007. New Labour is in power, the economy is booming. And Eddie Stobart is about to make the decision that will eventually destroy everything the family built. In 2007, Westbury Property Fund, a small, already publicly listed company, bought Eddie Stobart for £137.7 million, £62 million in cash, and £76 million in new shares. Westbury then renamed itself Stobart Group and began trading on the London Stock Exchange in September. Suddenly, those green and red trucks aren't just serving customers anymore. They're serving shareholders. They're serving the markets. The family business that once made decisions based on what was right for the long term now has to deliver quarterly results that keep share prices moving upward. Then in 2014, the final nail in the coffin. D-Bay Capital, a private equity firm, acquires 51% of Stobart Group for £280.8 million. The Stobart family, who had already seen their control diluted by the 2007 stock market listing, now watch as private equity takes majority control of their creation. The numbers seem incredible at first. Revenue explodes from £623.9 million to £843.1 million between 2017 and 2018. That's 35% growth in a single year. They're buying companies left and right. iForce, Speedy Freight, building a logistics empire that spans the entire country. But here's what the corporate cheerleaders won't tell you. This isn't organic growth. This isn't Eddie Stobart getting better at what they do. This is financial engineering. This is using debt to buy revenue. This is the classic private equity playbook. Grow now, worry about the consequences later. The shift from service and heritage to returns, leverage, and aggressive expansion is complete. The Eddie Stobart that your grandfather respected is dead. What's left is a logo on a balance sheet. Everyone celebrates Eddie Stobart's rapid growth in the 2000s as a success story. But actually, this aggressive expansion and debt-fueled acquisition spree planted the seeds of its downfall. Growth without profitability is just expensive market share, and expensive market share is worthless when the bills come due. Those impressive revenue figures were hiding some uncomfortable truths about the logistics industry, and those truths were about to surface. The brutal economics of modern logistics. Let me explain something that the corporate press releases never mention. The logistics industry is absolutely brutal. I mean brutal in ways that would make your Victorian factory owner blush. Here's the reality. You're running capital-intensive operations that require massive upfront investment. Trucks cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. Warehouses cost millions. IT systems cost millions more. And for all that investment, your margins are wafer thin. We're talking 2 to 5% if you're lucky. Now imagine trying to compete in that environment. Your customers, the big supermarkets, the online retailers, they don't care about your investment. They don't care about your heritage. They care about one thing, price. And they'll play you against every other logistics company in Britain to get it. This is where Eddie Stobart's emotional connection with consumers becomes worthless. Because consumers don't choose their logistics provider. Tesco does, Amazon does, and they choose based on spreadsheets, not sentiment. Meanwhile, your costs are going through the roof. Vehicle lease prices surge, fuel prices spike, driver wages rise because there's a massive shortage. Insurance costs explode. Regulatory compliance gets more expensive every year. In 2024, despite pulling in £556.8 million in revenue, more than £500 million, Eddie Stobart posted a pre-tax loss of £883,000. Their operating profit nearly halved because vehicle lease costs alone were crushing them. Let me put that in perspective. Imagine you're running a corner shop that takes in £556 every day, but after paying your rent, your stock, your staff, your insurance, your taxes, you're losing nearly £1 every single day. How long could you survive? But here's truth that nobody in the industry wants to admit. Scale doesn't save you in logistics. Being bigger often just means bigger losses if you can't control costs. The idea that Eddie Stobart could grow their way out of trouble was always a fantasy. The e-commerce boom that everyone thought would save logistics companies actually made things worse. Yes, there were more parcels to deliver, but customers expected faster delivery, better tracking, more flexibility, all of which costs money. Money that comes straight off those already tiny margins. By 2019, these structural pressures weren't just squeezing Eddie Stobart, they were about to bring down Britain's most famous fleet entirely. Crisis and rescue, when the trucks nearly stopped. July 29th, 2019. A date that should be remembered as one of the darkest days in British transport history. Stobart Group ceases trading. 6,500 jobs hanging in the balance. Trucks sitting idle in depots across the country. The company that had thundered down Britain's motorways for over 4 decades was about to disappear forever. What had happened? The brutal economics I just explained had finally caught up. Mounting losses, cash flow problems, and a balance sheet that looked like a car crash. The private equity dream of endless growth had collided with the reality of an industry that destroys capital faster than you can inject it. This wasn't just about bad business decisions. This was about accounting irregularities that made the problems even worse. The rescue deal that followed tells you everything you need to know about what Eddie Stobart had become. D-Bay Capital, the same private equity firm that had driven the expansion, stepped in with a complex refinancing arrangement. They saved approximately the 6,500 jobs. They kept the trucks rolling. They preserved the brand. The media celebrated it as a happy ending. Eddie Stobart saved, screamed the headlines. Politicians praised the deal for protecting British jobs. Everyone patted themselves on the back for rescuing a national treasure. However, this wasn't a rescue. This was the beginning of the end of Eddie Stobart, as Britain knew it. Think about what a rescue actually means. It means the original business model failed. It means the growth strategy was unsustainable. It means everything that made Eddie Stobart special, the independence, the family heritage, the British ownership, was now hostage to whoever had the deepest pockets. Sometimes survival comes at the price of your identity, and Eddie Stobart was about to learn that lesson the hard way, because the story doesn't end with the rescue. Oh no, the final chapter is about what happens when survival means surrendering everything you once stood for. Swallowed by giants. The Culina Takeover. 2 years after the rescue that was supposed to save Eddie Stobart, and what happens? They get sold again. Culina Group, a massive European food and drink logistics company, acquires Green White Star, Eddie Stobart's parent company. The deal creates what they call a £2.2 billion logistics behemoth with over 100 distribution centres across the UK. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? The corporate press releases are full of synergies and market leadership and operational excellence. All the usual buzzwords that companies use when they're destroying something beautiful. But let me translate that corporate speak for you. Eddie Stobart is no longer an independent company. It's no longer British owned. It's no longer making decisions in Cumberland. It's become just one brand in a portfolio managed by executives in boardrooms across Europe. Those 22,000 staff across Culina Group. Most of them have never heard of truck spotting. They don't understand why anyone would name a lorry Margaret or Susan. They look at Eddie Stobart and see asset utilisation rates and profit margins and operational efficiency metrics. Here's the scale of what we've lost. Eddie Stobart trucks now represent just a tiny fraction of this massive logistics empire. The brand that once dominated British roads is now a minor subsidiary in a corporate structure so complex that most people couldn't draw you an organisational chart. But here's what really breaks my heart. You can still see those green and red trucks on the motorways today. They still have names. They're They're still clean and well maintained. To a casual observer, nothing has changed. But everything has changed. The decisions about routes, contracts, pricing, investment, they're not being made by people who understand British transport culture. They're being made by analysts optimising spreadsheets for shareholders they'll never meet. Everyone says consolidation in logistics is inevitable and efficient. But what we really lost was something uniquely British. We lost a company where truck drivers knew their vehicle's name and customers called to specifically request an Eddie Stobart truck. That personal touch, that emotional connection, that sense of pride, you can't replicate that at corporate scale. You can't manufacture it in a boardroom. You can't optimise it on a spreadsheet. So what does Eddie Stobart's journey tell us about modern Britain? What lessons can we learn from watching a beloved institution get systematically dismantled by the very forces that promised to save it? Eddie Stobart's story isn't just about trucks and logistics. It's about what happens when beloved British institutions meet global financial markets. The tragedy isn't that Eddie Stobart went bust. Companies go bust all the time. The tragedy is that they survived by becoming everything they once stood against. They kept the logo and killed the soul. What we really lost wasn't a company. We lost the idea that business could be personal. We lost the belief that success didn't have to come at the expense of character. We lost the notion that some things are worth more than their balance sheet value. What do you remember about Eddie Stobart from your childhood? Did you spot them on family holidays? Were you a member of the fan club? Did you collect the model trucks or read the magazines? Share your memories in the comments below, because those memories are all we have left of what Eddie Stobart really was. And if this story has opened your eyes to what's really happening to British business, hit that subscribe button, because Eddie Stobart isn't unique. This same pattern is playing out across dozens of companies that once defined our industrial heritage. Next week, I'll be investigating another British brand that lost its way, and trust me, that story will shock you even more than this one. Until then, remember, every time we lose a company like Eddie Stobart, we don't just lose jobs or services. We lose a piece of who we are as a nation. And once it's gone forever.